Welcome. The name of the show is The Next Chapter, and I'm your host, Fred Hughes, Amazon best-selling author. So what's this show about? Well, Biz TV gave me the opportunity to do record shows with authors, editors, publishers, a lot of other people involved in the written word, to both entertain you and to provide information to those of you out there who might have a story that they want to tell, whether it's a short story, whether it's a novel, or maybe you just want to hear how other people have gotten into the business. One of the general rules of the writing world is that a story that's not been written can't be read. So I encourage all of you to put your words down. Anyway, the show's to talk about all those things. This week's show, my guest this week is Jeremy Brundage. And he writes for Curse Dragon Ship Publishing. If you might remember, Kelly and Kevin Colby have been on the show before, and they're the publishers of Curse Dragon Ship. And he's got a new book coming out, rather interesting subject. I'll let him talk about it in the next segment. Jeremy and I met at Superstars. I think last year I talked about Superstars on a show, and I've probably referenced it a few times. Superstars is a writer's, it's not really a writer's convention. Call it a summit. It's not about selling books. It's not about interacting with fans. It's a bunch of authors who get together to talk about the business of writing and the business of selling books. And all of you have heard me talk about it before. Writing a story, writing a book is the easy part. It actually fits nicely into my personality of being by myself, pounding away on the keyboard. I'm very comfortable doing that. But Superstars goes and teaches authors about all the rest of the business of being a professional author, marketing, branding, advertising, finding people to do your Audible books, finding the right editors, connecting with publishers, connecting with agents. Those are all things that get discussed in various seminars, and other things like, you've written books and you have royalties for those books. How do you make sure that if you pass on, the right person can get those royalties after you passed away? Where do those royalties go? So those are all things that are discussed at the Superstars convention. And Jeremy and I met there, and we'll talk about that a little bit in his segment. But there were some other things. I was there as an attendee. I would never picture myself being a presenter or a lecturer or a speaker there. Although I ended up being one because my publisher, Chris Kennedy Publishing, did several presentations, and I attended a couple of them just to go and support him in what he was doing. And he dragged me into the discussions. In one in particular, and I'll reference this later, but I want to tell the story. I was a little late getting to Chris's discussion about what it takes to be an independent author and getting your book published and everything you have to do after that. And I walked in, and I was only 5 minutes late, and Chris was rushing through his slides. He had probably about a 20-minute slide presentation, and I'd seen it before, and he was like 10, 15 minutes into the slide presentation, and it was only 5 minutes into the lecture. And so he was flying through because he didn't realize he thought he had less time than he had to present it. And as I walked in, he says, "Oh, here's a perfect example. Here's Fred Hughes, who is one of the people who write for me, and he runs his own podcast, his own you know show dedicated to authors, and that's a resource that all of you should be looking for, how to get, to promote yourself." So needless to say, I was swamped after that, as when that let out of, there was probably 20, 25 people in that seminar, and at least half of them hit me up for about what I did and how they could get on my show. And I didn't have a problem with that. Passed out a lot of my Biz TV business cards. And that energized me, because it reminded me about what I wanted to do as an author, how I wanted to help other people. And I walked away with that very energized. So we talked about it in the first show of this season, how I'd been a little down and had problems getting motivated to do the show again, and that one lecture changed everything. As all of you know, I changed. One of the main purposes of this show is to help people get their stuff written and help it get published, and then help it get to in front of as many people as possible. So that was an exciting experience. The other one was connecting with a bunch of old friends who were out there. Kevin Eikenberry, the aforementioned, who's a great author and a fellow Chris Kennedy Publishing. He also writes for other people. Obviously, Chris Kennedy, he and I spent some time with each other discussing future projects. Chris and I are going to be working together on a book series, he and I co-writing it. More details to come, but that's one of the things you do at these events when you're with a bunch of other authors. Have to tell the story of how I was having lunch with some friends of mine, and one of them is Mark Stallings, who's been on the show, and Mark knows everybody. And well, first off, he lives in Colorado Springs, and that's where the convention's held. And there are an awful lot of authors that live in the Colorado Springs area. And so we're sitting there, and Ray Porter was looking for a place to sit and have lunch. And Mark waves him over. And he sits down next to me, and you may not recognize the name, but you would recognize the voice. Ray Porter is one of the most well-known and in-demand voice actors doing audiobooks. Those of you who know who Jonathan Mayberry is, he does all of Jonathan Mayberry's books. He does especially the Joe Ledger series. He does a lot of voice acting and everything else. And I had met Ray before, but I think we had both had a few too many drinks that night. He recognized that he knew me, that we had met before, but couldn't place my name, which is somewhat humbling for me, that he actually knew that he had met me before. So we interacted with each other, and he was just telling such great stories about being a voice actor and all the different things he does, because he doesn't only do audible books. He also does voice acting for a variety of different, I don't want to say cartoons, but animated movies, etc. And he was talking and telling a story, and I closed my eyes and I just listened to him talk. And I'm going, oh my gosh, Joe Ledger, because that's the Jonathan Mayberry, an iconic Jonathan Mayberry character. Joe Ledger is sitting next to me, because that's who I could hear. It was Joe Ledger sitting there. One one of the funniest stories he talked, because I asked him, well, how do you get ready when you're doing a book? I mean, do you prepare a script? I mean, because I've worked with other voice actors, and that's what they do. They put a script together. I'm going to use this voice here and there. I'm going to pause here and there. And he looked and he goes, no, I don't do any of that. I just pick up the book and I start reading it. And I'm going, but you'd read the book before? And he goes, no, typically I've never read the book before. I just pick it up and I cold read it. And I'm going, oh my gosh. That's how good a voice actor he is. Now he says there's a lot of swearing, and I hit the pause button, and he has a little button in his recording, the pause and tell that he's redoing a segment, but that was astounding. Anyway, after the break, we'll be talking to Jeremy and learn all about his new book. I'm Fred Hughes, and this is The Next Chapter. Back from the break. Thanks for rejoining us. In case you forgot, my name's Fred Hughes. The show's title is The Next Chapter, and I'm here with Jeremy Brundage, who's on the show this week to talk about a new book that he has coming out with Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing. So welcome to the show, Jeremy, and I want to thank you for being on the show. So why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell everybody about this new book of yours?
Thanks for having me on, Fred. I really appreciate it. My new book is actually the second in a series. I didn't get a lot of promotional time for the first book, so a lot of people really don't know about the first book either. But the new book is called Medusa and Maud's Oddity Odyssey, and as you said, it's with Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing. It's not really a Greek mythology book, but it's a fantasy book that's set in ancient Greece. And to really set this one up, I have to go into the first book just a little bit.
I was going to say, go ahead.
Yeah. My first book was called The 12 Trials of Doug. And with a title like that, you can tell that it's probably not going to be terribly serious. And it's not. It's pretty much a joke to start off with, but follows the 12 Trials of Hercules, except it's an average, really nice guy named Doug that's actually taking on all of these tasks to basically impress a princess. Well, more to impress her father, who won't let Doug actually date the princess unless Doug completes the tasks.
I had a father like that.
I think we all know somebody like that. So there are things that are relatable to it. And it was something that started off as a comedy. The first few trials that he actually goes through are just ridiculous. But Doug, being a good guy, just keeps plugging along. And the trials start to get a little more serious as everything gets deeper into the book. And Doug never changes. He's pretty stable throughout the entire thing, but his goals start to change because towards the end of the book, instead of actually trying to actually impress a girl or impress her father, he's trying to think about saving his family and saving all of the people he loves. Can't give away much more than that, but it's a good book. It's humorous. It's got a lot of serious stuff as it gets towards the end of the book. And Doug is kind of the icon that he is the ideal that you try to reach for. He's just a good guy. And everybody wants to be that good guy that, gets along with everyone, that loves everyone. And that's the first book. The second book actually follows his brother, Motifixius, and Medusa. Medusa no longer has her curse. And so she's a little broken. This is not the same ideal that we were talking about in the first book with Doug. She's had her curse taken away, and now she's dealing with the fact that she's got survivor's guilt. She's thinking about all of the things that she's had to actually do because of this curse. And does that still matter now that she's not got the curse anymore? As for Doug's brother, Motifixius, or Maud, as we call him, he is an engineer. He is basically clueless about everything going on around him. And he's having to deal with the fact that his brother isn't with them anymore. I mean, the brother is still there, but he's not next to Maud all the time. And Maud doesn't know how to actually navigate normal life. We've all been that person before where you feel awkward at parties, you feel awkward in gatherings. And so I think this is a relatable character. I think there are a lot of things that we can actually relate to with both Medusa and Maud in this second book.
Okay, so Maud has all these adventures, some of them with Medusa. Any other mythological characters that he interacts with?
They interact with a lot of mythological characters. I was told by one of my editors that my version of Zeus is probably the most kind, fatherly version of Zeus that she's ever heard of. Because most of the time when we think of Zeus, we think of this fit throwing philanderer that just has his way with whoever he wants to.
I was going to say philanderer is not the right word. Lech,
Okay.
maybe.
The actual way that this entire series came about is my brother and I were my brother's a writer, James A. Owen.
I was going to say your
Uh,
brother's a rather famous writer.
yeah, and we were sitting in the kitchen one day, and we were having this discussion, and we started joking. It's Friday. We're tired. You just kind of you're clearing out the system before you get to the weekend. And I had this thought about Patrick Warburton,
Okay.
the actor Patrick Warburton, that we know from The Tick and The Emperor's New Groove, and as David Putty, Elaine Bennis's
Yeah, he
boyfriend on
plays
Seinfeld.
he's plays some quirky characters.
Yeah. So I was imagining Patrick Warburton as Zeus. And every time
Okay.
a woman would walk past, yeah, I'd do that.
Well, Zeus did for the most part, but
Pretty much. Um, I've toned that down a little bit. My book is more aimed for a young adult and middle grade, so I don't have the sex and the violence in there. I try to keep it a little more reader friendly. So Zeus is there, but he is more of a fatherly figure. Um, Obviously, we have Medusa in the first book. She still has the curse. In the second book, the curse is gone, and she's dealing with the ramifications of that. We have Cronus and Kronos, the two characters that get confused all the time because their names sound so similar. Uh, we have Typhon. There's a lot of mythological Greek figures that I actually pull in. You don't have to know all of the myths of Greece to actually enjoy the book. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, I have these footnotes that I actually put in the book. Sometimes they're very informative. Sometimes they're just off the wall, stupid, whatever's running through my head at the time. But you don't get lost in it.
it sounds like to me this would be a great, call it primer for young adults to that because really they don't teach mythology in school anymore. And
Yeah.
you almost have to go to college to learn about it now. And I would think that that would be a great, introduction to kids that might read your book and say, "Oh, I want to know more about, some of these Greek gods sound pretty cool. So maybe I want to learn more about
I do take some liberties.
them."
We already mentioned Zeus being a more fatherly figure. No, it's not that way in Greek myth.
No, but it would be, I still think it's a good lead in. And with that, it's almost time for us to take a break. I'm sitting here talking with Jeremy Brundage, talking about his satirical Greek mythology fantasy book that he's writing. After the break, Jeremy's going to tell us how he became an author. I'm Fred Hughes, and this is the next chapter. we're back and we're still talking with Jeremy Brundage. And Jeremy was talking about, well, he basically gave us a recap of his first book and then told us about the second book. What's the, once again, so since we're pushing the book, what's the name of the second book, Jeremy?
Medusa and Maud's Oddity Odyssey.
Okay. Now, want to talk a little bit about how Jeremy got started in as a writer and in the author business. And he mentioned in the previous segment he has a rather famous brother who's a, pretty well known, at least in writer circles, and sort of responsible for how Jeremy and I got together because we met at Superstars last year, which his brother is let's say one of the founders of the Superstars. So tell us, Jeremy, how did you decide to start writing?
I've been writing, doing short stories, essays, and stuff since I was a kid. Uh, in high school, I think they had something. It was a short story contest for the entire school, and at the end of the year, they gave away the prizes for whoever got like fifth place through first place. And I think I took first, second, fourth, and fifth, out of the entire school. And it's not a huge school, but still, that was 400 kids. Um, I've I've always loved writing. I think it's a great way to actually express yourself. And my brother is this writer that has done the Here There Be Dragons books, and um, Drawing Out the Dragons is his motivational book. Um, but James and I have worked together for a long time, and that's part of the reason that I'm a writer now. Is we have done his comic series Star Child. We did magazines together. He was the editorial director, and I was the one that was doing all the production behind the scenes. So I'm used to editing. I'm used to writing. I'm used to him actually going through his writing process and bouncing stuff off of me. So I've been involved in publishing and writing for more than 2 decades. But with my brother being this famous author, every time that I would give somebody advice about what they should do with their writing or with their publishing, they'd kind of look at me like, well, that's all good, but you're not the famous guy. You can't possibly know what you're talking about.
Well, you and I both know. I mean, amongst a circle of authors that I deal with, that I run with, it's almost like, well, would you rather make money or you rather be famous? Because I know a lot of people that no one's probably ever heard of, but as soon as you start rolling off their book titles or their credits, oh, I've read that. Oh, I've read that. Yeah, but
Yeah.
you didn't know who he was. So I think you sort of fall into that category, Jeremy. You obviously have the street creds. It's just that nobody knows who you are.
And after a while, when you're giving that kind of advice, one of the things that always came up is like, how come you haven't ever published a novel? If you know all of this stuff, and honestly, I just never finished. I've been working on some of my novels for a decade or more and never could quite catch whatever it was to finish the novel. It's one of the main traps that a writer actually faces, is getting stuck somewhere in the middle, or can't figure out the end, or you figured out the end, but now you can't get the beginning to work. And so you're just rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. There comes a point to become a writer, you just have to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't sell it if you don't write it. You can't, well, you shouldn't say it that way. You can't publish it if you don't finish it.
Yeah. My first draft of my first book that I sent to Kelly Colby at Cursed Dragon Ship, it was a mess. I am actually surprised that she was as patient as she was, because I think it started out at about 140,000 words, which is a rather long book.
It's especially for an early book from an author. Yes.
Yeah. And she said for the kind of comedy and the fantasy that I was actually aiming for, it should probably be about 90.
Yeah. And for
And so,
YA too. I mean,
yeah, we cut quite a bit. There was a lot of stuff that was left strewn on the floor behind us.
well, and as far as dev editing, she is Kelly Colby is really good
Yes.
at that type of work. And for those of you that don't understand, there's a lot of different editing out there. There's proofreading, there's copy editing, and basically they're when all of that is function of making sure all the the what is it 110 places you got to put a comma, that all those that you got commas in all those places, and everything like that, sentence structure. But a developmental editor goes in and looks at your story and sees how it can be improved. Maybe places where you've overthought things, overwritten things, and take it out, and other places where you've got plot gaps that you missed as you were writing. They'll point those out to you and say, hey, you need to finish this story arc. And a good developmental editor, and oh, by the way, they're not cheap, is can really step up, the quality of your book. And like I said, Kelly is one of those, and she is one of the publishers at Cursed Dragon Ship Publishing. So, but I want to circle back to all your short stories and stuff. Were those published in anthologies or some of the magazines, Jeremy?
No, I never really got my short stories published, uh, which is probably good because I've learned so much about writing now that they would definitely change somewhat. There's still a lot of them that have a lot of good plots, but my grasp of English language and those 100 some odd places where to put the comma,
Yeah.
I have a better grasp of that now. Uh, and a lot of that's because of Kelly, my other editor at Cursed Dragon Ship that does the copy edit is Ladybird editing.
Okay.
Uh, and Birdie she's just very thorough, very good about telling you, because I'm terrible with punctuation.
Oh,
It's just a writer's curse. They all have strengths and they all have weaknesses. And one of mine is punctuation.
well, and not to say anything bad about editors, but there's a reason why they're editors. I mean, they're meticulous, they know the rules, and I know editors that have this deep-seated fantasy about becoming authors, but they don't have the story ideas. Um,
Yeah.
and not everybody's cut out to be. Personally, I don't even consider myself a author or a writer. I think I told you this when we talked in Colorado. I'm a storyteller and I tell stories, and I hope that other people can go in and make it look pretty, but the story's mine.
Yeah. Yeah, I thank Kelly and Birdie for actually making me look like I understand how the English language works, and
Yep.
they're really good at that.
And they are, and and again, that's one of the advantages of having a good publisher and a good editor. They do make
Yeah,
it look good. Um, I mean, having done it, it's hard being an indie writer because you're all on your own. You
yeah.
might go out there and find yourself some good editors and stuff, but sometimes that's trial and error, finding the right person. And if you find yourself a good publisher, then they sort of do all that for you.
It's I know there are a lot of people that actually think the way to go is just self-publishing everything, and I'm not saying they're wrong, but there's a definite value to having somebody like Kelly look over your story, and she sees things that I don't see. It's that extra perspective that somebody with a trained eye can actually give you, and it really does. It changes the way the story develops. It changes the way the characters are actually portrayed. My first draft of this Medusa and Maud's Oddity Odyssey. I had Maud being clueless, but he was clueless in a different way, and it
Mhm.
didn't work. Um, in the first draft that I actually wrote, he had felt that he had missed his opportunity to have a relationship with somebody. And so he was lamenting that. And Kelly came in and she's like, this guy is an engineer. He's going to be clueless to all that stuff. He's not going to understand that he missed an opportunity. And it took a little bit more writing and finessing to get it to where she actually saw it could go. But it was such a better character because of it. So sometimes you have to bring somebody else in. I'm not saying you can't have good ideas by yourself, but sometimes an extra pair of eyes really helps.
Okay, when we come back from the last break, we're just going to talk all things writing with Jeremy. All right, we're back. Last segment with Jeremy, and it's been fun. So, for those of you, I talked about it in the opening segment. I just was just at Superstars Writing Seminar, and I'm not going to rehash all of what that is now. But Jeremy and I connected there, talked about books, and talked about. I think we met in Chris Kennedy's. Was it Chris
Yeah, it
Kennedy?
was Chris Kennedy's panel that he was doing.
Yeah, and I arrived late, and Chris, who's my publisher, was going like a ball of fire because he's used to shorter time. They they expanded the time for the panels from 45 minutes to an hour, but he thought he had only 45 minutes, so he was trying to do his screen presentation in 15 minutes so he had time for questions, and he was just rushing through, and I was 5 minutes late and walked in, and he happened to be talking about this podcast and stuff, and he says, and here's a guy who does that. And afterwards Jeremy and I talked, and I said, well, yeah, I want to have you on the show. I mean, I like talking, especially to, even though we talked about it, and Jeremy isn't exactly a new writer. He's been doing this for a while, and he's been working with his brother for a while, but he's now publishing stuff on his own.
Yeah.
So, um, anyway, and I'm doing all the talking, Jeremy. You're not saying anything. I might as well be doing my opening monologue. But anyway, so what did you get out of Superstars?
What did I get out of Superstars? This time it was a little bit different for me because um, I've been trying to say yes to things more.
Hmm.
And I was asked by one of the people in charge of the moderators if I'd actually moderate some of the panels. Basically, a glorified timekeeper, making sure that the speakers have uh, water if they need it, that their IT stuff is working correctly. And it was because of that that I was actually in that class with Chris Kennedy, and I met you. And Superstars is all about making connections. It's learning, but connections are important. So, taking that, I'm saying yes to more things. When this guy said that he did podcasts, like I should try to get in on that.
And it actually came as you know, and I think I shared this with you, and if I didn't, I had been struggling doing this. I hadn't been in the right mindset to do this, and that very lecture energized me to get going on this again. Not and more so to promote, help other writers tell their stories because that's important to me. So saying yes is important,
Yeah.
especially when
It,
important people ask you, "Would you do this for me?"
I'm not the important person yet, but I'm hoping to be.
Well,
No,
I was
it's,
referring to the person running the moderators, that because
yeah, yeah.
people who have made a ton of connections because all of a sudden now you're interacting with all these people that are um, on these panels because you're the
Yeah.
moderator.
One of the main things that main threats, I guess I would say, to a writer is being timid.
Oh,
You know, we are so, oh, I don't want to bother him. Oh, this is going too far to actually ask for this kind of consideration. And to actually get your story to the people that want to read it, to the people that are going to connect to it, you can't be timid. But you have to actually take risks. You have to do things that you're not going to be totally comfortable with. You said that thing about making money or being famous. If I could make money, that'd be great. But you have to accept that there's going to be a certain amount of fame that actually goes with that. You may not be recognized everywhere you go, but you do have to put yourself out there.
oh, and yeah, you do. And it's sort of a dichotomy because writing is a very solo, endeavor. You're by
Yeah.
yourself in front of your keyboard and you're hacking away. Uh, and all of a sudden you've got to come out of your little cave and interact with the world if you want other people to know about what you're working on.
Yeah. But one of the fallacies we actually operate under is we've finished the novel and all the hard part is done.
That's actually the easy part.
That is the easy part. You don't realize that being out there and interacting with people, and you're selling yourself. You really are, because once you connect with somebody, then you've got a fan, and that fan is the promotion that gets you hooked in with other people. But they connect with you because they feel something for you. They It's not always just about the writing. Sometimes it's about the people. One of the things that's so great about superstars, though, is you can meet those people that actually do energize you, and help you maybe take a chance you wouldn't have taken otherwise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden somebody presents you an opportunity that you would have never imagined having. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm not talking about this podcast, by the way. I'm talking about, oh, somebody said, oh, I'm doing an anthology. Would you write a short story in it?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And that's for all the aspiring authors out there. I think I've talked about it before. When you get asked to submit a story for an anthology, or a publisher asks you, oh, likes your idea on a book, and they ask you to send them a first chapter, the answer is always yes, I will do that.
Because if they're interested, even if they don't accept it, they're going to look over that and they're going to tell you why they didn't accept it.
Right. And they'll
Um,
remember you. And that's
yeah,
important.
it is important. Um, I'm remembering this artist that my brother and I were actually working with, that he was an intern at the studio for a while, and he had somebody offer him like $50 or $80 to do a commission. Just a little black and white drawing, and he couldn't bring himself to do it.
Right.
It would have been his first paid work, and he just couldn't bring himself to do it.
That was a lost
And
opportunity to promote himself.
yeah, if you have an opportunity, somebody is willing to take a chance on you, you give everything you can and make the most of that chance.
Well, on those parting, really good words, that's it for this week's show. I want to thank Jeremy for being on. I'll see everybody next show. My name is Fred Hughes, and this is the next chapter.